Doña Leila's voice drifted from the kitchen where she was supervising her maid in frying a whole platter of snacks. "Another pastelito, Dede." "She's been like that since the minute I got here," Jaimito confided. His voice had grown tender. He was loosening up. "She must have asked me 100 times, 'Where's Dede? Where's Dede?'" It was as close as he could get to admitting how he felt. "I have a suggestion, compadre," Manolo said. "Why don't you two take a honeymoon somewhere nice?" "The boys have colds," Dede said lamely. "Their grandmother will take very good care of them, I'm sure," Manolo laughed. "Why not go up to, wasn't it Jarabacoa where you honeymooned?" "No, Rio San Juan, that area," Jaimito said, entering into the plan. "We went to Jarabacoa," Minerva reminded Manolo in a tight voice that suggested she disapproved of the reconciliation he was engineering. Her sister was better off alone. "They have a beautiful new hotel in Rio San Juan," Manolo went on. "There's a balcony with each room, every one with a sea view." "I hear the prices are reasonable," Jaimito put in. It was as if the two men were working on another deal together. "So, what do you say?" Manolo concluded. Neither Jaimito nor Dede said a word. "Then it's settled," Manolo said. But he must have felt the unsettledness in their silence, for he went on, "Look, everyone has troubles. Minerva and I went through our own rough times. The important thing is to use a crisis like this to grow closer. Isn't that so, mi amor?" Minerva's guard was still up. Some people can't ever really see eye to eye. Her statement broke the deadlock, though it was probably the last thing Minerva had intended. Jaimito's competitive streak was reawakened. "Dede and I see perfectly eye to eye. The problem is other people confusing things." "The problem is when I open my eyes and see for myself," Dede was thinking. But she was too shaken by the night's events and the long week of indecision to contradict him. And so it was that the weekend that was to have been a watershed in Dede's life turned into a trip down memory lane in a rented boat. In and out of the famous lagoons they had visited as a young bride and groom, Jaimito rowed, stopping to point with his oar to the swamp of mangroves where the Taínos had fished and later hidden from the Spanish. Hadn't she heard him say so 11 years ago? And at night, sitting on their private balcony with Jaimito's arm around her and his promises in her ear, Dede gazed up at the stars. Recently in Vanidades, she had read how starlight took years to travel down to earth. The star whose light she was now seeing could have gone out years ago. What comfort if she counted them, if in that dark heaven she traced a ram, when already half its brilliant horn might be gone. False hopes, she thought. Let the nights be totally dark. But even that dark wish she made on one of those stars. The roundup started by the end of the following week. Early that Saturday, Jaimito dropped off Dede at Mama's with the two youngest boys. Mama had asked for Dede's help, planting a crown of thorns border, so she said. But Dede knew what her mother really wanted. She was worried about her daughter after her panicked visit a week ago. She wouldn't ask Dede any questions. Mama always said that what went on in her daughter's marriages was their business. Just by watching Dede lay the small plants in the ground, Mama would know the doings in her heart. As Dede walked up the driveway, assessing what still needed to be done in the yard, the boys raced each other to the door. They were swallowed up by the early morning silence of the house. It seemed odd that Mama had not come out to greet her. Then Dede noticed the servants gathered in the backyard, and Tono breaking away, walking briskly towards her. Her face had the burdened look of someone about to deliver bad news. "What, Tono? Tell me." Dede found she was clutching the woman's arm. "Don Leandro has been arrested." Only him? Tono nodded, and shamefully in her heart, Dede was thankful that her sisters had been spared before she was frightened for Leandro. Inside, Maria Teresa was sitting on the couch, unplaiting and plaiting her hair, her face puffy from crying. Mama stood by, reminding her that everything was going to be all right. By habit, Dede swept her eyes across the room looking for the boys. She heard them in one of the bedrooms playing with their baby cousin Jacqueline. "She just got here," Mama was saying. "I was about to send the boy for you." There were no phone lines out where the old house was, another reason Mama had moved up to the main road. Dede sat down. Her knees always gave out on her when she was scared. "What happened?" Mate sobbed out her story, her breath wheezy with the asthma she always got whenever she was upset. She and Leandro had been asleep just a couple of hours when they heard a knock that didn't wait for an answer. The Servicio de Inteligencia Militar, the SEAM, had broken down the door of their apartment, stormed inside, roughed up Leandro, and carried him away. Then they ransacked the house, ripped open the upholstery on the couch and chairs, and drove off in the new Chevrolet. Mate stopped, too short of breath to continue. "But why? Why?" Mama kept asking. "Leandro's a serious boy, an engineer." Neither Mate nor Dede knew how to answer her. Dede tried calling Minerva in Monte Cristi, but the operator reported the line was dead. Now Mama, who had stood by accepting their shrugs for answers, leveled her gaze at each of them. "What is going on here? And don't try to tell me nothing. I know something is going on." Mate flinched as if she knew she had misbehaved. "Mama," Dede said, knowing the time had come to offer their mother the truth. She patted a space between them on the couch. "You're going to have to sit down for this." Dede was the first to rush out when they heard the commotion in the front yard. What she saw made no sense at first. The servants were all on the front lawn now, Fela with a screaming Raulito in her arms. Noris stood by, holding Manolito's hand, both of them crying, and there was Patria on her knees, rocking herself back and forth, pulling the grass out of the ground in handfuls. Slowly, Dede pieced together the story Patria was telling. The SEAM had come for Pedrito and Nelson, who, alerted by some neighbors, had fled into the hills. Patria had answered the door and told the officers that her husband and son were away in the capital, but the SEAM overran the place anyway. They scoured the property, dug up the fields, and found the buried boxes full of their incriminating cargo, as well as an old box of papers. Inflammatory materials, they called it. But all Patria saw were pretty notebooks written in a girlish hand. Probably something Noris had wanted to keep private from her nosy older brother, and so hidden away in the grove. They tore the house apart, hauling away the doors, windows, the priceless mahogany beams of Pedrito's old family rancho. It was like watching her life dismantled before her very eyes, Patria said, weeping. The glories she had trained on a vine, the Virgencita in the silver frame, blessed by the Bishop of Higüey, the wardrobe with little ducks she had stenciled on when Raulito was born. All of it violated, broken, desecrated, destroyed. Then they set fire to what was left. And Nelson and Pedrito, seeing the conflagration and fearing for Patria and the children, came running down from the hills, their hands over their heads, giving themselves up. "I've been good. I've been good," Patria was screaming at the sky. The ground around her was bare. The grass lay in sad clumps at her side. Why she did what she did next, Dede didn't know. Grief driving her to salvage something, she supposed. Down she got on her knees and began tamping the grass back. In a soothing voice, she reminded her sister of the faith that had always sustained her. "You believe in God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth." Sobbing, Patria fell in, reciting the credo. "Light of light, who for us men and for our salvation came down from heaven Dede confirmed in a steady voice. They could not get hold of Jaimito, for he had gone off to a tobacco auction for the day. The new doctor could not come out from San Francisco after they had explained why they needed him. He had an emergency, he told Dede, but being a connoisseur of fear, she guessed he was afraid. Don Bernardo kindly brought over some of Doña Belén's sedatives, and indiscriminately Dede gave everyone a small dose, even the babies, even Tono and Fela, and of course her boys. A numbed dreariness descended on the house, everyone moving in slow motion in the gloom of Milltown and recent events. Dede kept trying to call Minerva, but the line was truly conclusively down, and the operator became annoyed. Finally, Dede reached Minerva at Manolo's mother's house. How relieved Dede felt to hear her voice. It was then she realized that after all her indecisiveness, she had never really had a choice. Whether she joined their underground or not, her fate was bound up with the fates of her sisters. She would suffer whatever they suffered. If they died, she would not want to go on living without them. Yes, Manolo had been arrested last night, too. Minerva's voice was tight. No doubt Doña Fefita, Manolo's mother, was at her side. Every once in a while, Minerva broke into a fit of coughing. "Are you all right?" they asked her. There was a long pause. Yes, Minerva rallied. The phone's been disconnected, but the house is standing. Nothing but books for them to steal. Minerva's laughter exploded into a coughing fit. Just allergies, she explained when they worried she was ill. "Put on Patria, please," Minerva asked after giving the grim rundown. "I want to ask her something." When Dede explained how Patria had finally settled down with a sedative, that maybe it was better if she didn't come to the phone, Minerva point-blank asked, "Do you know if she saved any of the kids' tennis shoes?" "Ay, Minerva," Dede sighed. The coded talk was so transparent even she could guess what her sister was talking about. "Here's Mama," Dede cut her off. "She wants to talk to you." Mama kept pleading with Minerva to come home. "It's better if we're all together." Finally, she handed the phone back to Dede. "You convince her," as if Minerva had ever listened to Dede. "I am not going to run scared," Minerva stated before Dede could even begin convincing. "I'm fine. Now, can't Patria come to the line?" A few days later, Dede received Minerva's panicky note. She was desperate. She needed money. Creditors were at the door. She had to buy medicines because, don't tell Mama, she had been diagnosed with tuberculosis. "I hate to involve you, but since you're in charge of the family finances, could Dede advance her some cash to be taken out of Minerva's share of the house and lands in the future?" Too proud to just plain ask for help, Dede took off in Jaimito's pickup, avoiding a stop at Mama's to use the phone, since Mama would start asking questions. From the bank, Dede called Minerva to tell her that she was on her way with the money, but instead, she reached a distraught Doña Fefita. Minerva had been taken that very morning. The little house ransacked and boarded up. In the background, Dede could hear Minou crying piteously. "I'm coming to get you," she promised the little girl. The child calmed down some. "Is Mama with you?" Dede took a deep breath. "Yes, Mama is here." The beginning of many stories. Later she would hedge and say she meant her own Mama, but for now she wanted to spare the child even a moment of further anguish. She rode out to the tobacco fields where Jaimito had said he'd be supervising the planting of the new crop. She had wondered, as she was dialing Minerva, what Jaimito would do when he came home and found his wife and his pickup missing. Something told her he would not respond with his usual fury. Despite herself, Dede had to admit she liked what she sensed, that the power was shifting in their marriage. Coming home from Rio San Juan, she had finally told him, crying as she did, that she could not continue with their marriage. He had wept, too, and begged for a second chance. For 100th chance, she thought. Now, events were running away with them, trampling over her personal griefs.